Okay. I guess we could start.
Hi, Geshe.
Hi, Shir. Okay.
Yeah, we can start.
Okay. Great.
So hello everyone. Thank you all for joining, and thank you Geshe for teaching us. I'm sorry.
All right. Okay.
I'm pasting here. Sorry, I'm
Good.
just pasting here the link for donation. So if you want to support the activity of Dharma Friends of Israel and our teacher, of course, so you can do it through the link. And Geshe, thank you again.
Okay.
Yours.
All right. Well, let's start. Let's start with a bit of motivation. Well, first, calming the mind through mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, and then a short meditation followed by prayers. A short meditation on setting the motivation, of course, and then prayers. And now, in order to be inspired by the great masters of the past, visualize in the space in front of you Buddha Shakyamuni, who's seated on a open lotus flower, on top of which are a sun disk and a moon disk. And the Buddha appears in the form of a fully ordained monks with the saffron robes of an Indian monk. The Buddha's body is made of pure light. And with great wisdom and compassion, he's gently smiling at you. And then surrounding the Buddhas are great Panditas, the Indian great masters, such as Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Bhavaviveka, Chandakirti, and so forth. And also the great Tibetan masters, all seated in the space in front of you. serving as a refuge as well as an inspiration for your own spiritual practice. And think that these masters are all inseparable from your own personal spiritual teacher. And then surrounding you and surrounding those masters are all sentient beings, quietly seated all around us. With all their different problems and difficulties. And then think in the presence of these great masters and for the welfare of all these countless sentient beings, may I attain the fully enlightened state of a Buddha. And may today become another cause of my own awakening. And then without losing this motivation, let's recite the prayers together. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay. Right, so this time actually I can see the chat. Usually I don't see it. I have to click on it first. So if you like to ask questions, if there's anything that comes up and you just want to write it down, you're welcome to do so. And I could try and, I will definitely make a time for answering questions. And so I'll look at those first. And if there are no questions there, then you're welcome to ask directly. All right, so we got to still the third ground. Last time I did something a little bit different to before. I didn't explain the verses as such, but I'll continue today with the verses. I only do this when I find there's something that you may find interesting or helpful. That's especially from the commentaries. In this case, it was from Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary about imprints that play such a huge part, that are so important. They're mentioned again and again, like imprints, like something is left on the mind. In this case, we're talking about merit, positive imprints that are left on the mind. And that can be destroyed by anger. While at the same time, of course, negative imprints can also be destroyed or purified by virtuous types of mind. So there's this constant, interaction, if you like. Our mind, like the potential that is left on the mind, constantly changing in dependence on what type of minds we generate. And you may have read the commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa, those pages I talked about last time, where Lama Tsongkhapa says, well, anger can destroy virtue, even though you've dedicated it towards enlightenment. However, usually the kind of consensus by the masters, or the oral kind of explanation, is that it doesn't destroy it totally. So there's definitely still a purpose for dedicating all the virtue we've accumulated, all the merit we've accumulated towards enlightenment. Well, for two reasons. One reason is that it doesn't ripen in the form of an inferior kind of goal, some inferior result. So any type of merit we accumulate, that it doesn't just get wasted for something not as significant as enlightenment, and also to protect it to some degree from the destruction by anger. Therefore, even though as a bodhisattva, anger can still be destroyed, because we've heard in one of the verses, it definitely talks about even bodhisattvas, when they get angry with other bodhisattvas, they can lose their merit. They can, in other words, lose some of the residue that was left on the mind as a result of engaging in positive actions. All right. But just quickly, to not forget the verses we already covered in that third ground, the first verse basically explains why this level of a bodhisattva. So just to remind you, a bodhisattva on the third level, to keep it simple, so there are different explanations. We speak of bodhisattvas in terms of actually 4 different paths: the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, which are both these two. So path of preparation, path of accumulation, path of preparation. Those first 2 levels, if you like, they're preparatory for a direct realization, a direct understanding of reality, which takes place when a bodhisattva reaches the path of seeing. And that is followed by the path of meditation. Therefore, there are 2 kind of preparatory levels called path of accumulation, path of preparation, and then there are the 2 levels when a bodhisattva has actually understood, has directly realized emptiness or selflessness. And that consists of 2 sub-levels: path of seeing, path of meditation. And to keep it simple, the path of seeing usually is also described as the first level, the first ground, or the first bhumi. And then from the second bhumi onwards, a bodhisattva is no longer on the path of seeing, but on the path of meditation. Which means that on the path of meditation, you have the second bhumi, the third, the fourth, all the way up to the 9th bhumi. 10th bhumi, sorry, all the way up to the 10th bhumi. Therefore, on the first bhumi, you're on the path of seeing. On the remaining bhumis, you are on the path of meditation as a bodhisattva. And the subdivision into those different bhumis, well, it makes sense considering the fact that on the path of meditation, there's so many levels, there's so much that's happening. Though you're no longer on the path of seeing, you're now on the path of meditation and you're just before Buddhahood, but there's still quite a few changes a practitioner, you once you become a bodhisattva, you as a practitioner goes through until you become fully enlightened. So we've discussed the first bhumi, that's same as the path of seeing, and we discussed the second bhumi, and now we discuss the third bhumi, which is actually only like at the side, if you like. It's not the main explanation. Once we get to the sixth ground, of course, this whole text is mainly about emptiness. However, it's a supplement to Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamika Karika in that, yes, it deals with emptiness very extensively, but it also explains the path to enlightenment, basically on the level, on the basis of the six perfections. Okay. Now here on the third ground, we're talking about this as part of the third level, the third chapter. We talk about the third bhumi. And each of the bhumi is characterized by one of the different perfections. The first ground, the perfection of generosity, the second ground, the perfection of ethical discipline, and now the third ground, the perfection of forbearance. On that ground, a bodhisattva reaches a special level of forbearance, a special level of patience, or, well, yeah, forbearance. And not just that, of course, that's not all. Also, on that third level, a bodhisattva eliminates certain afflictive emotions, certain restrictions, in particular with regard to the view of with regard to the wrong view of reality, the wrong or the misapprehension of reality. A certain innate level is eradicated on that third ground. So going through the different grounds, the different levels, all the way up to the 10th ground, bodhisattvas keep eliminating more and more and more subtler levels of misapprehensions. And then when they're all gone, then the kind of imprints that are left, the subtlest types of imprints, they're eliminated. So anything that's in the way to becoming fully enlightened gets purified, gets eliminated from the mind by way of directly realizing emptiness. All right, we'll have more discussions on that, but just for now, this much. And once you reach this third level, there's this special vision. There's like because of the purification of the mind, the bodhisattvas on the third level have a special vision of some, like a copper colored glow that bodhisattvas experience, like a type of vision that's like a sunrise, which is why the first verse talks about this copper colored glow, copper colored glow that's like that of a sunrise. The first line says that the fire here is the fire of the direct realization of emptiness, the fire of wisdom, experiencing emptiness, burns of the fuel. The fuel here means the dual perception, the dual, that is the perception of phenomena existing inherently, existent in and of itself, of all phenomena. So it burns away some of this fuel. It doesn't burn away all the misperceptions, because it doesn't get at the very subtle ones, which will be later eliminated, but still it eliminates the fuel of some of the misapprehensions of reality, and therefore all the afflictive emotions that these misapprehensions potentially would give rise to, now no longer can give rise to, because they've been eliminated. So this third level is called the third ground, the luminous, because of this copper-like vision. And then it goes right into why on this level, besides the fact that you eliminate certain afflictive emotions, besides the fact as a bodhisattva you have this copper-colored vision of this kind of glowing light, that's another sign, or that's another characteristic on that level. Another characteristic is that once you reach that level, your practice in forbearance becomes very special. It's like a preeminent, it's surpassing, it's greater than with regard to the previous levels. So it's a type of forbearance or patience that, although you've been really patient, you've got incredible level of patience, but this is special. This practice becomes special on this level. And for two verses, it talks about, gives an example, like no matter how obnoxious someone is, if they cut your body, cut you into pieces, um, with regard to this torturer that slice by slice chops off the meat on your flesh on your arm, for instance, like there's not a single moment of impatience and no displeasure whatsoever because of their incredible love and compassion, but also, of course, their wisdom realizing emptiness. So here it says a disturbed person, like what else? Who else would be would do this? To slice flesh from our bones, or the bones of the body of a bodhisattva. Although the bodhisattva hasn't done anything, and so it describes cutting it off, and there's just not a single, not an ounce of, there's not a tiniest moment of displeasure or well, resentment, etc., towards this body, towards this torturer. Why? Because of their understanding of selflessness, of understanding there is no intrinsic I that can be harmed, there's no intrinsic body that can be harmed, there's no intrinsic torturer, and so forth. It appears to us like a mirror image. Things appear as if inherently existent, just as my face appears to be an actual face. The reflection of my face appears to be a face, but it's not a face. Likewise, things appear to exist independently, but they don't exist that way. And then the text goes on. So those were verses 1 to 3. I'll just quickly go over them to remind you of those. We discussed them actually 2 weeks ago. And then in verse 4, it actually comes right down to how are we to apply forbearance to our own life? How, I mean, we haven't reached that level yet. We're far from having reached that level, but we learn about it to be able to integrate this practice into our daily life. And how do we do this? Well, by practicing patience, to bring the practice of patience into our daily life, which takes time. It's a process. Why does it take time? Well, it depends on the kind of person. The more we're familiar, the more we've habituated to getting angry, and everyone is different. Everyone reacts differently in certain situations. Some people get angry when they hear loud noises. Other people get angry when the person looks at them in a certain way. So there are different things that trigger our anger. And for some, it takes a little longer. For some, it doesn't. Some hold a grudge, some don't. It's individually different. The point is, we got used to a certain behavior. It's just a habit. It's just some kind of habituation, familiarity with getting angry. And any familiarity that has been acquired, since from a Buddhist point of view, it's not in the nature of our mind. In fact, we even if we were born with a slight tendency to become angry easier, we weren't born as angry people. I mean, even as little children, as babies, we didn't have the type of anger we have now. So it's all acquired. We have tendencies, possibly from a previous life, whatever that, whatever happened in the past. But the point is, when we were very little, these didn't express themselves in the way they express themselves now, these moments of anger, and they were acquired. And anything that was acquired that has arisen from different causes and conditions can be first reduced and eventually eliminated. Now, we start off with reducing anger, with reducing our reactions, our habitual reactions to certain situations. Usually, there are two ways we're asked to deal with them. One way is, of course, when we're really angry. Just the other day, His Holiness was asked, like one of the teachings His Holiness gave, I think the question was to the extent, how can we practice emptiness and compassion when we're really angry in the moment of great anger? And I seem to remember His Holiness kind of reacted like, oh, no way can you do that. No way, that's not the right moment when you're really furious to start meditating on emptiness and bodhicitta, etc. Like, you need to prepare for those moments when you could get angry. I mean, we know in the future there are going to be plenty of situations that are going to make us angry. So the meditation we're doing here, that's suggested here, is as a preparation for those moments. What we can do when the moment is there, what we can do is to sit down and start meditating on patience in that moment. Well, we can, but we have to first get our anger down, and that usually proves difficult. So what we do in that moment of anger, what we should do is not to focus on the object, that which makes us angry, but focus our intention on the anger itself. You can all try that when you're really, really furious, and you just take that moment and go, oh, I wonder how that anger of mine works. What is this anger? Right? You just get yourself to generate that sense of curiosity. Oh, I want to pay more attention to my anger. And the moment your mind pays attention to the anger, it no longer pays attention to whatever made you furious. So it's usually another person, a situation, a colleague, whatever. So when you're no longer focused on that object, then if you focus on the mind itself, the anger goes by itself because you're not angry with your own anger. Well, you may also become angry with your own anger, and then you may just try and change the subject, think of something else if you can. But usually, if you just adopt, try to adopt like a kind of curious mind, oh, I'd like to know what my anger feels like, the anger can no longer operate. But what we're doing here is more in preparation for when we get angry, to visualize a situation that would make us angry, usually does. So I know from my own mind, okay, next time this situation arises, I'll get angry. But now, like in a theater play, I go through the notion of, or I go through the motions of like getting angry. So what would I usually do? Like, let's say something makes me angry. Well, whatever the person has done, if I respond with vengeance, if I retaliate, if I give someone like I repay whatever they've done, I retaliate, then does the harm that they inflicted on me, does that get undone? Of course it doesn't. So that's the first part to think about. Does it really make sense? Because it's already been done. The words have been said, the insult was handed out, if you like, the whatever has annoyed me, it's already taken place. Otherwise I wouldn't have gotten angry. So it doesn't make sense. If next time this happens, well, when it's done, it's done. What's the point? And it serves no resentment or anger doesn't serve any purpose in our life. It brings more, well, it brings more problems in this life, of course. We'll get back at the person, and there's back and forth and back and forth. And well, oftentimes if both react angrily, and which is usually the case, the situation doesn't get resolved. And of course, for a future situation, for a future life, well, we'll experience those same situations over and over again. If we think about this long enough, through meditation, through reflection, then we'll find that next time, instead of getting angry right away, we may get angry 5 seconds later. Now, that doesn't seem huge, but that's 5 seconds. So oftentimes the momentum has passed. We cannot get as angry as we ordinarily could get because there was some, it's kind of gone. So this force is just not there, and maybe our anger is weaker. And if you continuously do that, at some point you'll find you won't react with anger at all. So it's just creating a new habit. And the old habit is also based on reasoning. Honestly, I usually say that, and well, even though I've said it many times, but even if I repeat myself here, but if you watch your mind, when you get angry, when there's anger, there's also a certain reason that gets you there, right? There's a reasoning. I'm not saying the reasoning, it's correct reasoning. It's not necessary. It's not logical reasoning. It's usually, well, incorrect reasoning, illogical reasoning. But still, there's a process we go through. How dare they say that to me? They're so obnoxious. I've done so much for them. Again and again, they cause trouble. Can't they understand they're making a mistake? I've told them so many, like all these reasons we go through. And as a result of these, we get angry. And we acquire our habituation of anger through these reasonings. It's just not fair. They're wrong and I'm right. I've been patient long enough. Whatever's our reasons, but in a way, we've been doing a meditation on anger, not as an antidote to anger, but as in generating, as in cultivating anger. So we've done that in the past. What we're doing in the setting of a meditation, we do all the time. all our afflictive emotions, of course, they arise as a result of a misapprehension of reality, but that's not all. That's not it. It's not just that. It's not like I misapprehend the other person as inherently existent and myself as inherently existent, and then they do something that annoys me and right away I get angry. It doesn't really work like that. It's more like I start thinking about, why do they do that? This is just so obnoxious. And they did that yesterday and they do it again today. Like, just watch your own thoughts. They're so quick. It's this reasoning. Like I said, it's not necessary. It's not necessarily. I shouldn't even use the word necessarily. It's not logical. It doesn't make sense. However, it's kind of justifying to ourselves, or not even justifying. It's just getting ourselves into these reasons again and again, like, this is what they've done, this is what, and so forth, which ends up in an emotion, right? So there's some kind of irrational, like it works like a rational kind of thought process, which results in an emotion of anger. Now we're doing the same thing, but we're replacing this irrational rationalization, this illogical rationalization. It's their mistake, they've done this, they've done that, etc., with a rationalization that is in accordance with reality. Okay, and we can check all these points. Does it make sense to get back at the person? Does it benefit me? All those reasonings, now again applying reasonings, they end up in an emotion such as, I'm not going to get angry. That's patience. The determination not to get angry. It's another kind of emotion. Okay, anger is a kind of, well, it's a mind that exaggerates the negativity of the object of the anger, and on top of that wants to be away from that, or wants to well, harm the object, right? So there's different aspirations or different wishes that go along with this exaggerated type of mind, whereas patience doesn't require exaggeration. It's based on analysis that is now literally rational, in that it's logical. It doesn't make sense to get angry. It doesn't undo the harm that has already been inflicted. It doesn't serve a purpose here in this life, and so forth. And based on that, the wish not to react, the wish not to get angry. Okay. All right. So it's just a counter force that actually operates in a similar way. Reasoning, some kind of reasons we set forth, and an emotional response. In this case, it's patience. To initially reduce the anger. Of course, the goal is, at some point, once we reach the level of a bodhisattva on the path of seeing, path of meditation, on these levels that are described here, of course, to at that point eliminate the root cause, the misapprehension of reality that has given rise to the, or that gives rise to the anger. If that misapprehension is gone, we can no longer become angry. But first, we need to understand emptiness for that. And if you've got a lot of anger, if our habituation of anger, of our forceful habit of becoming angry, this uncontrolled habit is too strong, it'll be a huge obstacle to realizing emptiness. It'd be a huge obstacle to generating concentration. For instance, shamatha. You'll see later on in some of the verses, it talks about some of the special qualities you reach on that level where there's not a slightest kind of notion of impatience. And because that's gone, because there's no anger, the mind is so undisturbed that you reach certain levels of concentrations, which will be described later on. So deep levels of concentrations are possible because the obstacle, the anger, is no longer obstructing that effort. Now that shows us, why do we have to reduce our patience now? Because we will never realize emptiness with a mind that's totally distracted by anger. Our mind gets so disrupted by anger, it gets disrupted by any emotion, any negative emotion, any afflictive emotion. But the worst is anger. The one that really disrupts our mind and really destroys our peace of mind in the strongest way, and depending, of course, of the level of anger and hatred, well, is this particular afflictive emotion. Therefore, we need to work with these antidotes. These are just temporary, they just reduce the anger, but without it, we won't realize emptiness. Okay. unless you've already realized emptiness and you've got, okay, then you just need to reduce your anger to bring this realization of emptiness back that you've already possibly attained in the past. But in case you haven't, well, the anger is a huge obstacle. So, of course, strong attachment, strong envy anyway, but definitely too. But anger here is one of the most disruptive ones. Okay, now during verse 3, 4, we've already discussed it. We meditated on it. Nothing needs to be added. Verse 5 it also talks about, well, not just the pointlessness of getting angry, that it doesn't benefit us, but it also speaks of the fact that we exhaust positive karma, virtues karma accumulated in the past. So we just get rid of all this effort we've made, in particular if we get angry with the bodhisattva. And we just, oh yeah, it comes in the next verse actually. No, first on this level, in general, we exhaust a lot of merit, positive actions that are much harder to accumulate than negative actions. So we destroy them. And actually, if we're honest, can we really bear? That is, can we really live through? Are we able to live through all these consequences, these negative results we're now sawing right now, we're creating right now? Do we really want to experience all these results? If I now retaliate, if I well, I don't know, beat someone up because they beat me or whatever, do I really want to experience the consequences of having well, beaten someone or insulted someone now? Do I want to, can I bear the consequences on that of that by inflicting harm on others? All right, so to understand, nothing gets lost, as in I will experience the results of my own actions. And it's like, I've given the example before, I don't want to experience the harm of the other person, but then I create, and I've created, so again, to remind ourselves too, that usually we blame the other person, we blame the situation. This is what is mainly responsible for my anger. But in actuality, the harm that's inflicted on us is a result of actions I've accumulated in the past. If I hadn't accumulated these actions, no way this person could have inflicted any harm on me, even if they wished to do so. There's just no way. There's no way that this harm could have been inflicted on me if I hadn't created the causes for it. So the karmic cause, my own action, that is mainly responsible for experience, whatever causes me to get angry. And if I don't want to experience this right now, why am I getting angry? And out of this anger, I'll verbally insult someone or physically abuse someone, whatever it is. If then I create again the cause for the same harm in the future. That's like you got sick by having eaten a piece of meat that made you violently sick. And then after you've gotten so sick and maybe you're kind of getting a little bit better, you eat the same meat over again to get sick all over again. It kind of makes that much sense. I mean, it feels similar to doing that. All right. And it's funny because we never do that. We don't do that. I mean, if there's a certain type of food, we've eaten it and it made us sick, oftentimes for many years, we can't eat this again. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that with the mind. Okay. Then it goes on to say, well, anger with a bodhisattva is particularly dangerous. And that got us to talk about what we talked about last time. Don't need to explain that. We extensively went through that. And now we got to verse 7, which in this part here, it's verse 7 and first 3 lines. This is describing anger on the basis of, well, rejecting anger or working on rejecting anger on the basis of contemplating the numerous faults of anger. Okay, so previously we've talked about the harm can't be undone. We'll have to bear everything we do. We eliminate non-virtues, virtuous actions, etc., or virtuous imprints. But here it talks more directly. Well, directly in a sense. Well, it talks about other disadvantages. Let's put it that way. First of all, one disadvantage of anger is it disfigures us. It makes us wrath or anger disfigures our face. Well, that makes sense in general. I mean, however beautiful someone is, in that moment of anger, our face usually looks so contorted. Like it looks so, well, full of anger and wrath. The most beautiful face can no longer look beautiful. I mean, we turn bright red and our eyes are wide open and we start sweating. And anyway, the expression is just scary. So, however beautiful someone is, the most beautiful person in the world does no longer look beautiful when they're angry. And then, of course, if you get angry continuously, well, it'll leave wrinkles in your face, and you can tell, but sometimes by elderly people, like the kind of wrinkles they have, if they're very jolly and happy, they have a kind of, their wrinkles kind of express that. Whereas a person who's got a lot of anger, well, it's just this frowny kind of frowning face, that is a result of years and years of, well, being resentful, etc. But that is just from the point of view of this life. Actually, is said that as one of the causes for, well, a face, beautiful or like an ugly face. Here, ugly, not in the sense of classical beauty as such, but when people have a face that is pleasing, when you trust that person, you like to be in their presence. Well, that's a face that's the result of patience. Whereas a type of face that is like scary, there's just something about that face, even though the person may not in any way, his or her face doesn't in any way reflect their state of mind, but we could be reborn, we could take birth as a human being and have a type of face that's scary to others. I mean, it's just explained to be as one of those results. And if we have a bodhisattva attitude, well, it's actually important to have a face that doesn't put people off. In the sense, we want to attract people to the Dharma. And all we have, I mean, to the Dharma, attract to the Dharma, not by way of getting people to become Buddhists, to convert them, etc. It's not about that. But if they're interested in the Dharma, and if you're a bodhisattva and you've got something to share with others, well, you want to have a look that pulls people towards you so you can benefit them. It's a little, difficult, that point, because we need to understand the motivation. Out of selfishness, you would want to be beautiful. Out of altruism, you would want to be beautiful. It's just a totally different motivation. Not beautiful, like I'm saying, not beautiful in the classical sense. Here, it means a type of beauty, a type of like a look that attracts people to you in the sense that they're not scared of you, they're not put off by you. Instead, they're open and they like to learn the Dharma, okay, from you. So if you take, for instance, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he's got a type of face because of his smile. And well, I remember once reading something about Paul Ekman, who's done he's done this research on micro expressions. I think that's been his main kind of field for many years. So he's advised the FBI and other, well, organizations about how to detect whether someone is lying. You can tell somehow, not through the coarse kind of expressions, but micro expressions in your face. Anyway, so he has spent a lot of time with His Holiness, and I remember once reading something about him when he said he's never seen a face like His Holiness. The micro expressions of His Holiness are totally unique. So these micro expressions, we're not aware of them, but they affect us in a certain way on a subconscious level, maybe putting us off in the case of some people, or feeling of having a feeling of warmth or whatever it is with regard to other people. So someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who, if he's not a fully enlightened Buddha, is definitely a highly realized bodhisattva. Well, if people are drawn to him, then they're more willing to listen to what he's got to say. And of course, we've all heard it. He's got so much to say. Therefore, as a bodhisattva, you have the responsibility to make sure your face becomes the result of, in the future, you'll take care of having the type of face that is not the result of anger. All right, that was a long winded explanation. And again, I can't stress it enough. This is not talking about physical beauty. It's talking about a kind of face that, I mean, I'm sometimes thinking of the face of Tupten Jimba. I don't know. He's just got this nice face. Really, like I showed it to my family the other day. We were talking about some people just having a smile on their face. And they were like, "What are you talking about, having a smile on your face?" And I showed them a picture of Tupten Jimba and they were like, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, he looks really nice." So if you know him, His Holiness is English translator. He's got this kind face. He always looks nice and kind. I think even if he's angry, he probably looks nice and kind. I can't even imagine he's got a frowny face. So to me, that's someone who's definitely practiced a lot of patience in his last life. Okay. Anyway, so wrath disfigures your face and leads you to what is unwholesome. Yeah, of course. Out of anger, we do lots of non-virtuous things. And even worse so, it robs your mind of the judgment of what is right and wrong. Oh, so true. That's why in English, I got mad, right? We say, I got mad. Well, got mad as in like, oh, I don't know, I lost it. Intolerance, or actually the Tibetan word here is the opposite of patience or forbearance. So impatience or, well, intolerance, he chose this word, is swift to throw you to the lower realms. Well, to be reborn in lower states, of course, like in the long term, this is what it causes. So very precisely, external figure in terms of even if you're reborn as a human, for instance, it disfigures your face in the way just described, leads us to negative things, makes us mad, and of course also is responsible for a lot of suffering in future lives. Okay. Those are the first 3 lines of verse 7. And then verse 7, the last line, here is talking about the positive qualities of patience. First, it talked about the negative qualities of not having patience, and now it's talking about the positive qualities of actually having patience, being patient. But forbearance, it says, brings qualities opposite to those just described. Very simple. All right, so don't need to go through them again. Forbearance, it goes on to say, makes you, oh, well, the opposite of those, and then they're described, makes you attractive, and again, attractive in a particular way, and dear to the sublime ones. Dear to the sublime ones. That needs to be explained. The sublime ones are those great beings, the great spiritual teachers. Now, dear doesn't mean they prefer you over someone else. It doesn't work like that. Of course, as we've heard before, they're totally well, there's no impatience, for instance, and then in the Pramanavartika also it talks about the total equanimity to such a degree that if one person massages their arm and the other person cuts off their arm, their reaction is equal with regard to both people. So they don't prefer one over the other. But it depends on the kind of spiritual quality a person has. So someone who's practiced patience, and patience doesn't just mean being patient in the face of harm. It also means being patient with the Dharma, being patient with suffering in general. So, okay, there's a problem. Let's face it. Let's not run away and get upset or depressed and so forth, but rather, all right, there's a problem. Okay, I'll deal with it, to kind of keep calm in the face of suffering, and of course also with regard to the Dharma. I mean, Dharma practice is so difficult. There are times when it's easier and there are times when it's harder. Okay. So again, especially at those times when we don't seem to be able to practice patience, the whole bodhicitta thing, it's just, no, I can't do it. Initially, it felt good, I could do it, and I no longer can do it. Not to give up, but rather, okay, I've got a rough patch. I need to work through it, do some purification, accumulate more merit, communicate with my teacher mentally, request my teacher for his or her assistance. So if it's for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like it should be a qualified master, such as with His Holiness, to actually, they use the word supplicate. That is such an old-fashioned word, to supplicate. I think it's more like to communicate mentally, to mentally connect whoever is your teacher. So I just take the example of His Holiness. So to communicate with your teacher, to mentally ask your teacher, well, describe your problem, describe the situation, and mentally communicate, please assist me to overcome this problem. Because if your teacher is qualified, your teacher is definitely got the ability, well, the clairvoyant ability to know your mind. So that is one point. So if you have this type of teacher, but if your teacher doesn't have that ability, but you perceive your teacher as being inseparable from the Buddhas, then you actually are communicating with the Buddhas. This sounds a little bizarre, but actually there's no reason why we couldn't communicate with a Buddha's mind. If you just think of a Buddha, if you just connect to a Buddha's mind. But usually we don't know any Buddhas other than Buddha Shakyamuni. He was there in India 2,600 years ago. So it's really hard to think, oh, the Buddhas are still around, or the Buddha Shakyamuni's mind is still around me. It's hard to think that way, which is why we have our own spiritual teachers. And by thinking that our own spiritual teachers are one with the Buddhas, through our spiritual teachers, we actually connect with the Buddha. And we're basically asking for their assistance, but we have to ask. It doesn't mean that they can eliminate our suffering, or they can go, they can go beyond our karma, etc. They can't do that. But in the same way, if you want to get advice on what to eat and how to keep healthy, well, you have to ask a nutrition or a nutritioner, or you have to ask a gym teacher. You have to at least ask to then receive advice. So again, with your spiritual practice, of course, if you can directly ask your teacher, great. But a really highly qualified teacher like his holiness, you can't just end up having audiences all the time. I mean, well, you could maybe once you're lucky enough to get one, but that's usually 5 minutes. Like, no way you can be able to resolve your issue in that moment. So the best is to communicate in that mental way. And that is said to be, I'm here quoting Geshe Kelsang, who I've been quoting many times in the past. This is one of the most effective ways to continue with your practice. You feel you get stuck? Continue with accumulating merit, rejoicing, for instance, in the virtue of other practitioners, applying the 4 powers, such as regret and so forth, to purify negativities, and communicate with your teacher mentally. So those 3, accumulating merit, purifying negativity, and communicating with your teacher, should be your first methods. When you find, well, they should be always present anyway, but when you find you get stuck, when your Dharma practice, like I talked about this before, he's explained it. Initially when you get in the Dharma, oh, it's so smooth and everything is running wonderful and you love the teachings, and you reach a point where like that initial enthusiasm, it kind of wears off. And then you're faced with your own mind and you feel like you've got more afflictions than before because suddenly you recognize all of them. And the process seems much slower. And again, there's something that allows you to get through and things are faster again, and then you're stuck again. That's totally normal. However, these are the 3 that you shouldn't neglect at that time. When you study the Dharma, especially when you practice the Dharma, communicating with your teacher, accumulating merit, and purifying negativities. And rejoicing in others is the most powerful, because it's a great method to overcoming jealousy, to overcoming envy, just whatever success other people have, in particular their virtuous actions, to deeply rejoice in them. So it gives you a great joy in that moment. Rejoicing means you generate joy, and it accumulates a lot of virtue. And at the same time, of course, you also purify negativities automatically. And then combine it with the mantra of recitation. Great. Okay, anyway, just to remind you of that. But coming back to forbearance here. Forbearance makes you dear to the sublime ones, to those teachers, in that you now have the karma to hear their instructions. You're near to them, as in, like, of course, they would hold anyone near to them. But if the person doesn't have the karma, they can't hold them dear. They can't hold them dear. They can't communicate with them in the same way. Whereas if you practice patience, you'll be able much greater to benefit from the sublime ones. So you're closer to them in that sense. And of course, they're pleased by the actions you do. But even more importantly, there's this closeness that you generate. And in that way, you learn much more. You become wise in knowing what is appropriate and what is not. Yeah, you generate as a result of remaining patient, of being patient, you're able to differentiate better. Your understanding, your wisdom in terms of what is right, what is wrong, it'll just increase. And after you gain birth again, you're reborn again in a higher state, a celestial being or a human. Of course, a human is more desirable, but in general, you can also be reborn in a celestial realm. Of course, if you make the appropriate prayers and you'd rather be reborn as a human, but actually as a celestial being, that would probably also include, also include like rebirth in a Buddha realm, in a pure realm, which is definitely desirable. Though there's a pure realms where you're born as a human. Anyway, so a positive rebirth, and it secures the exhaustion of negative karma, right? Therefore, so many reasons to um, practice patience. And then the summary, there's a short summary of the points made before with an advice to cultivate forbearance. That's verse 9. Knowing the faults and benefits, knowing the faults and benefits of anger and forbearance, respectively. So the faults of anger and the benefits of forbearance of the ordinary beings, which is anger, and bodhisattvas, in that case, forbearance, shun intolerance and cultivate swiftly and constantly the forbearance praised by the Aryas. Okay, so in other words, having understood that ordinary beings, they get angry easily, and there's so many faults to the anger that ordinary people have. If you compare that to the qualities, the benefits of forbearance that bodhisattvas have, well, once you've understood the advantages of one and the advantages of forbearance and the disadvantages of anger, well, now make an effort to shun, to get rid of, to well, eliminate or reduce at least intolerance, that is anger, and cultivate swiftly and constantly. So to make an effort, um, not just to have a vacation from your practice on patience, but rather swiftly and constantly patience or forbearance that was praised by those Aryas, by those who realized emptiness directly. Then with verse 10, there's a division again of the perfection of forbearance. Forbearance can be divided in the same way as we had it before, in terms of being patient, trying to be patient in the face of harm, in the face of suffering, as well as with our Dharma practice. Practicing that, but also at the same time, not letting go of emptiness, not ignoring, not letting go of again and again reflecting on the fact that I don't exist. The person who's patient doesn't exist inherently. Um, so here, well, might as well read it. So forbearance, even dedicated towards perfect Buddhahood, is mundane, is ordinary if objectified in terms of the three factors. All right, so the three factors are the person practicing patience, the object of patience, the other person possibly, or the situation, and the action of being patient. That none of those exist in and of themselves. They're merely labeled on the basis of something other than themselves. They're just labeled. So practicing patience, if I practice patience, I'm practitioner of patience. Being a practitioner of patience is merely labeled on the basis of something other than this person who's practicing, which is the object of patience as well as the activity of practicing patience. It's labeled on the basis of those two, and of course, on the basis of many other factors. Therefore, it doesn't exist in and of itself, but is merely labeled. All right. If there's no such objectification, so in other words, if I practice patience, if I can be patient in my daily life and I don't objectify, the Buddha said this is a perfection that indeed transcends the world. All right. So I've said a lot, these verses, well, I've explained a lot from these verses, but what are they what are they basically teaching us? In what way is that relevant to our daily life? I guess to a certain degree, it's become clear, but it's actually all about bringing the Dharma into our daily life. Of course, once or as long as we don't let go of a sense of care for other sentient beings, a sense of, well, compassion, the wish for other sentient beings to be free from suffering. And based on that, of course, the wish to become fully enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. If we can retain that, if we can hold on to that and refresh it, of course, again and again, when we notice that it grows weaker, to do anything we can. People are just like me. Everyone is just like me. We all make mistakes. We do the craziest things, but we just don't know any better. It's our misapprehension of reality that drives us, that makes us uncontrollably do the craziest things that basically harm myself more than anyone else. If I can remember that and so many other, well, aspects about bodhicitta and so forth, if I can actually keep bodhicitta really close to my heart, then patience becomes much easier because it's motivated that is influenced by bodhicitta, of course. So I think what's most important for our daily practice, as His Holiness says, well, bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment, however fake it is, to just not let go of it. We're not bodhisattvas, all right, never mind, but let's just let's never give up on it. However hard it seems, there are times when it seems impossible to generate that mind, but you do it anyway. You just do it anyway. There are other types of mind that serve as an obstacle to it, and you just continuously go over them. Like you familiarize yourself again and again and again. That'll just automatically weaken the mind that hinders you from generating bodhicitta. That should definitely be in the forefront, however fake it feels, but do not lose your determination. And then, secondly, once you've got that to protect you, then it's much easier when problems arise to look at the situation, to try and remain calm and understand it's a process. It's a process. And when you have a problem with anger, well, look at these verses. Which of these instructions here, especially 4, 5, 6, until 10, well, 9, which of those work best for you? There may be something you read that, like what you need to do is so important that you remember what's in there and to read it with a beginner's mind, as in like you pretend I'm reading this for the first time and I'm reading this now to help myself to deal with this situation. If you read this, I'm sure you'll find something like you apply it. It's like, think that Chandrakirti has said this to you to deal with this problem. And I'm sure there'll be a line or two, or maybe even more than that, it helps you to actually be patient in that moment. And if then you still have a hard time, well, take Shantideva's Bodhisattva way of life. I remember Geshe he once talked about this in one of his teachings. I remember he just got this incredible way to teach these things that really, really bring it very clear. I mean, he makes it very clear to you. So what he said was he had some problem with a monk in the monastery. He had this problem with him. I don't remember all the details, but he was insulting. And, if you know Geshe, he's quite shy. He doesn't talk that much. And so, well, unless he teaches. So in private, he doesn't say much. And so it's hard to imagine. Someone must be really upset with him to actually insult Geshe. So I guess he wasn't really used to it. Like being insulted was not something he was used to, but it happened to him. He was insulted by someone, and he had such a hard time dealing with it, he described. And then he said, he tried to practice patience, And he took the Bodhisattva's way of life, the practice of patience in the patience chapter. He used that, and he said he read it over and over and over again in every situation that he came across this person over and over. It was always with this person. He met this person all the time, and so it was different situations that angered him or led to him being resentful, etc. And so he used that, and he said at some point he couldn't help it but really like this other person, just using Shantideva's book. So at some point, all the anger was gone, and it was just automatically, he didn't feel that resentment any longer, and that took care of the situation. So I don't remember all the details, but this is exactly, so Geshe Kelsang has shown us how to do this. While for this week, and again, to set forth what you should do within this week. So when you find yourself getting angry, all right, this is definitely a situation that's happened before. It's probably not the first time. Go back after you've gotten angry and look at what you've learned here, mainly because it should be Chandrakirti here, of course, your focus. But also, if that doesn't help, you can always go back to, for instance, Shantideva's text and use this as a method. See whether you'll find something that helps you to deal with that situation. All right. So that's again part of that's your homework. Your homework for this week is bodhicitta, bodhicitta, bodhicitta. Like do not let go of it. Remind yourself again and again, however hard it is. Secondly, check your own mind. Do you get angry? Is there anger? If you can, of course, as part of your practice in the morning, these verses should be a practice in the morning. Go through them. It's only a few verses. Spend some time meditating on them. Prepare yourself for the day. And then if you find there is a situation that makes you angry, go back. Take that situation. Look at these instructions that are given there and work with these. Make them your own. Come up with your own ideas. This is really the way to make the Dharma yours when you take those words and make them yours, in that you can now set them forth with your own words, because out of your own understanding, you set them forth. Okay? So this would be something I'd like you to do for this week. Still, the focus is on forbearance. Okay. I'll come to the question in a moment. Anyway, at the same time as it also mentions forbearance, if you can, every now and then, of course, and I'm asking a lot of you here, bring in emptiness, bring in whatever's your understanding. Understand that there's nothing in and of itself that makes me a person. I'm just a person labeled on the basis of a body and a mind. There's no person that can be found here other than that concept of a person labeled on something that is not a person, mind and body. I'm a woman. Again, there's no womanness found within me other than the label, the concept of a woman labeled on the basis of certain body parts and on the basis of the way I feel, for instance. And then you can do that with everything. I'm a daughter in relation to another woman and another man who I call my parents. I'm a sister on the basis of another part. So there's no sisterness, there's no daughterness that can be found other than the label, the concept, daughter, and so forth, based on something other than the thing itself, labeled based on another person, body and mind, and so forth. So if you can remind yourself along those lines, and of course we go into great detail on emptiness once we get to the sixth chapter. This is part 10, saying that we should, if we practice patience, we should also consider, of course, the fact that on a conventional level, yes, there's a person practicing patience, etc. But on an ultimate level, there's no inherent, no independent practice, etc. And then in verse 11, Chandrakirti says, on this ground, the Bodhisattva attains absorptions and clairvoyance. Here, attachment and aversion come to exhaust completely. Because of this, he or she is at all times also able to destroy all the attachment associated with the desire realm. Okay, so this is an explanation that's a little bit difficult to some degree. I mean, in terms of what types of concentrations are there. So I'm not going to go into all the details because there's just not enough time and it won't be as helpful. But well, I guess none of you would object to a little bit more concentration. And in particular, nowadays, there's great interest in shamatha, which on one hand, it's very good. Of course, we need more concentration in our stressful life with so many distractions, etc., that we lack concentration is very clear. So a deeper level of concentration is absolutely necessary. But of course, we also shouldn't forget that we need to reduce any non-virtuous activities, and in particular, strong attachment, strong desire, strong anger, which actually give rise to these non-virtuous activities, which very much disrupt our mind. So ethical conduct is a must. There's no other way. So what we can understand here, if we can actually practice patience, we'll be calmer. If we're calmer, we'll be more successful in our practice of shamatha. The mind will naturally be calmer. So don't forget, even if you get angry in the morning, you can think of your mind like a still lake. If you throw a stone, even though the stone has been long thrown, the ripples go on for a while. So our mind is like that. You get angry now, it disturbs your mind, but this disruption remains for some time. It's like these ripples going on and on and on and on. It grows subtler, but it'll remain. So therefore, if you really want a deeper level of shamatha or deeper level of concentration, let's not even talk of shamatha, this very deep level, but if you want to be more concentrated, you need to work on strong attachment. You need to work on anger. And anger here, of course, is addressed. All right. But to give you more of a philosophical explanation here, on that level, on that third level, bodhisattvas work on particular levels of concentrations which go beyond shamatha. What is shamatha? Shamatha, quite simply explained, but very difficult to develop. Shamatha is a state of concentration where you're able, with great clarity, vividness, on one hand, and great stability, able to focus on one object for at least 4 hours. So it's not just like you're almost asleep, you're kind of drowsy, you keep focusing on your breath and you're kind of almost dozing. No, that's not clarity, that's not vividness. You can be very vivid and very clear, but your mind is disrupted. You go here and there and here and there. That's not concentration. You're not stable. You need to have those two qualities of clarity and stableness. Remain with the object for at least 4 hours. But that's just the beginning, because our mind at some point, if we want to continue on the bodhisattva path, and don't worry about it, it seems so impossible right now, but it's like I talked about it in the past, it gets easier and easier. And if you're on the third ground, I mean, it's a smooth ride. It's pure joy what you're doing, and your practices come pretty much naturally. But just to understand it, once you get to that level, first, of course, shamatha, a bodhisattva has already developed on that level. Why have they already developed shamatha? Because they have a union of shamatha and vipassana, realizing emptiness. Already on the path of preparation, they have attained that. Okay, so if what I say just now is not familiar to you, well, wait, there'll be more explanation as we go along. The point is, this ability to remain focused for 4 hours with this sense of clarity and stability, you've already reached. But you need to go further. You need to go further to attain something that's called the first concentration. It's actually a set of 4 concentrations. It's very simply called first concentration, second concentration, third, and fourth. The 4 types of concentrations that are very deep levels of concentration that are extremely helpful. Now, these 4 levels of concentration, the first type you develop in order to gain certain extraordinary abilities. Actually, our mind can develop those extraordinary abilities. Every now and then, I think we have a taste of that, like an intuition. Oh, I have to stop here. Anyway, I'll talk more about these abilities next class. I was going to finish patience, but I guess this part is quite important. A little bit about these special mental abilities. I say a little bit about this, and we'll definitely finish patience. And then the next few chapters are very short anyway, so we'll soon start with the 6th chapter. All right, but let me just take a few questions so I can read. Here's Doron Barak says, is pain part of anger? Is pain part of anger? Does a bodhisattva on this level not feel pain? It seems that a baby feels pain and that it's not acquired. Pain is not part of anger. Pain can give rise to anger. Pain can be a trigger for anger, but not everyone who's in pain necessarily gets angry. That's the first part. So we talk about certain emotions, certain feelings that give rise, have the tendency to give rise to certain afflictive emotions. So let's say pleasure. If there's pleasure, the afflictive, it gives more rise to, well, we hold on to it. It gives rise to attachment. Whereas pain is more likely not to give rise to attachment, but the opposite, anger. But not necessarily. It's just when we talk about these 3 feelings, like feeling of anger, feeling of pain, feeling of pleasure, and a neutral feeling, they're associated with anger, attachment, and indifference. Okay, in general. But like I said, not every not every pain needs to anger. Does a bodhisattva on this level not feel pain? Not, definitely no mental pain. And then physical pain, it's more seen as a sensation. It's definitely, there is a sensation, but it seems like actually to us we label it pain, and then there's this sense of, oh, I want to be separate from this. I can't bear it. But because of their realization, there's no inherent I, there's no inherent pain. You see, our pain, making pain unbearable, it's our sense there's truly something there, truly harming my body. We strongly identify with it. They still have this some experience. There's some well, experience, if you like. However, it's not seen in and of itself as good, bad, or the other. It definitely still brings them to be cautious about their body, etc., but it doesn't give rise to anger. Yeah, doesn't. So therefore, it's not that type of level of pain. It seems that a baby feels pain and that is not acquired. Oh yeah. Pain, I mean, I'm saying that even with anger, at some point, I mean, they're also angry babies, of course. So there's a tendency to become angry, but I don't think there's a baby that's born like full of anger, right? It's like right from the beginning, from conception onwards. I think that comes later with the development of the mind, etc., etc. I mean, they're still definitely angry babies. I mean, sometimes you can see twins kind of pushing each other and having like a bit of a fight in the womb. So but I'm saying from the moment of conception, the mind is too subtle at that point to actually have anger. There's just the tendency. And pain also comes a little later. Can you please elaborate how clairvoyance of the 3rd Bhumi is different from clairvoyance of a Buddha? Okay, Iki asks this question. Well, it's pretty limited still, very limited. Clairvoyance doesn't mean you know everything. If you're with another person, you can, for instance, know that other person's mind, but it doesn't mean that you simultaneously know everyone else's mind in that moment. For instance, and I'll say this much, a bodhisattva, it's seen as really important that a bodhisattva has special abilities, such as clairvoyance. It's seen as very important, the clairvoyance, for instance, knowing another person's mind. Now, I would find that comfortable if just an ordinary person knew my own messy mind, but of course with a fully qualified teacher whose aspiration is others' welfare, it's actually extremely beneficial. So a bodhisattva on the third level would know, for instance, when they're with a disciple, would know this person's mind, would know the thoughts they had in the past. But while they're focused on that person's mind, while they're perceiving that, depending on their level of clairvoyance, they may not perceive other people's mind. They could maybe perceive 2 at a time or 3 at a time. So the level of concentration or clairvoyance grows stronger. A Buddha would know everyone's mind simultaneously. So there's a difference. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, so these supernatural feats are really, really helpful. And at some point they'll develop. They'll develop the more you become constant. So the more you practice this, the calmer your mind will get. And it's not even an effort. At some point you just won't want to do anything but practice this, and it'll become less and less of an effort. Right now it's overwhelming what we need to do. But of course we should take a step at a time. And for this week, is just continue with bodhicitta as far as we can, and patience to the degree I talked about it. And of course, also every now and then bringing back our understanding of the I and other phenomena. All right, so let's do this together. Let's do this practice just to give you a sense of how to meditate on what we've done, what we did today. And we'll start again with a few moments of breathing to let go of any disruptive thoughts. Try to think of a situation that ordinarily always makes you angry, or at least annoys you. A situation or something another person does. And now take a moment to just become aware of karma in that the only reason you experience that is that you've at some point created the causes for that experience. It may have been thousands of years ago in a totally different existence, a different life. And once the situation has happened, getting angry, can it actually undo what has happened? Do I really want to have the same experience again if I now get angry and out of this anger act in such a way that it becomes the karmic cause for a similar experience again in the future? And what are the disadvantages of getting angry? Well, I create a habit that strengthens my anger. It disfigures my face. And as scientists have found out, releases harmful chemicals in the body. It makes me mad so that I'm no longer able to do the right thing. Obstructs my judgment. And of course, in terms of my future existences, it causes an unattractive face. I'm not as close to my spiritual teachers, have a harder time practicing their instructions. And what's most devastating is that all the virtue I've accumulated with great hardship, a huge part of it may get destroyed by just a few moments of anger. Especially if I get angry with someone who's a bodhisattva, which I just never know. I can never tell whether someone has generated bodhicitta or not. So, in short, there's not the slightest benefit of getting angry. Which doesn't mean I cannot apply strong methods to stop another person from harming him or herself or others. But instead of being driven by anger, I should be driven by compassion. And the mind of enlightenment, the wish to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. And so now to conclude this meditation, generate a strong feeling of determination. I will not give up a single sentient being. Who are just like me, wishing to be happy and not to suffer. And out of their basic misapprehension of reality, create endless suffering for themselves over and over again. So how can I get angry with anyone, including myself? If we're all controlled by an inability, by a mind that is not able to realize how things really exist. And if anger is never a solution, instead creates numerous other problems. So now, having done this short meditation on patience as well as the mind of enlightenment, let's dedicate whatever positive potential we've created together towards our own enlightenment, so that our path towards awakening will become smoother and smoother. Okay, and with this motivation, or with this mind of dedication, let's do the prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, great. Sorry, a little bit over time. So I hope your homework for this week is clear. Bodhicitta, bodhicitta all the way through. So try and make it a point every morning when you get up, bodhicitta. And of course, then a meditation on the verses we went through on patience. Okay, so have a great week. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Geshe-ma.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Geshe-ma.
Geshe-ma.
Thank you.
ביי כולם, thank you everyone.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye.